Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So according to the National Center for Education Statistics, the average age of a head of school in America is around 52 years old. So if the average age of a head of school in a private school in America is around 52 years old, then it stands to reason that a lot of private school leaders have parents in their 70s and 80s. And I know that many of you listening, that your parents maybe have already passed away. Maybe many of you that are listening, your parents are still, pretty healthy, but you have a very difficult job. And many leaders listening to this episode are trying to lead a school while caring for aging parents. And sometimes that feels impossible. You know, there are 34 million adults in the United States that are providing unpaid care to an adult over the age of 50. And of those 34 million, 10 million of those caregivers are over age 50 themselves. And so, my mom had Parkinson's and diabetes. And before she passed in 2013, she spent a few years in a hospital bed in the middle of the living room floor, in the middle of the living room in my parents' home. And she passed in 2013. And then my dad, he did well for a while. And my sister was a live-in caregiver, and she passed away in February 2019 with a heart attack. And so from February 2019 to October 2021, when my father passed away at age 92, for that period of time, my brother and my sister and I took turns caring for my dad. And, you get a long day at school, and then Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, Tuesday and Friday after school, and then Saturday afternoon, I was heading over to my dad's. And so, like I said, you've got this busy job. You've got a demanding, stressful job. Many of you still have children living in the home, and just all of these things that you're trying to juggle. And sometimes it feels overwhelming, and sometimes it feels impossible. So on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss leading your school while caring for aging parents. And we're going to break that into two sections. First of all, we're going to talk about 7 challenges you face while caring for aging parents, and 7 strategies to help you navigate caring for aging parents while you lead your school. So before we jump into today's topic, I am super excited to let you know about a brand new resource. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, and it is a free 45-minute masterclass video webinar. And this is called Winning at School Without Losing at Home. Well, that's something that you want, right? Winning at school without losing at home. So this is a video training. It's got guided notes, and it'll do exactly what the title says. This training will help you be successful and organized and feel energized at school while still taking good care of yourself and your family. And I know that might sound too good to be true, but why don't you head over to theprivateschoolleader.com/winning to grab your free masterclass training, Winning at School Without Losing at Home. Check it out for yourself. That is theprivateschoolleader.com/winning. And I know that this webinar can really make a difference for you. So I'd love for you to grab that. Just a way of me giving you a free gift to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast every single week. And then I want to tell you quickly about PSL Pro. PSL Pro is a membership community that helps private school leaders go from feeling stressed out and discouraged and lonely to feeling energized, fulfilled, and supported. And you will have access to a thriving community of school leaders who actually get it and get you. And we have live meetups. We go live every week, whether it's a masterclass or a Success Path group coaching session, or twice a month we have a We Get It roundtable session where we go live with other leaders who get it, quote unquote, and get you. We have a live Q&A session about everything under the sun related to private school leadership. And it's not just the live meetups in the community, but we also have the PSL Pro Success Path, and it's a step-by-step plan where you identify where you are. There's different levels, the overwhelmed drifter, the intentional architect, all the way up to the fulfilled mentor. And after you identify where you are right now, you will be guided step by step through the content in Thrive Academy that, with my guidance, the support of the other leaders in the community, the live meetups, it's going to take you all the way to the top of the pyramid, the fulfilled mentor. And so I'd love for you to check this out and learn a little bit more. This is all for $1 a day. The privateschoolleader.com/membership is where you can learn more about joining the PSL Pro community and get that encouragement and that growth and that feeling of community that you're looking for, because being a private school leader can be pretty lonely and pretty isolating sometimes. So check it out at theprivateschoolleader.com/membership, and would be super excited to see you at the next live meetup. So today's topic, how to lead at school while caring for aging parents. We're going to break it into 2 sections, 7 challenges you will face while trying to do this, and then 7 strategies to help you navigate caring for aging parents while leading at school. So let's get into the challenges first of all. Challenge number 1, the emotional strain and mental fatigue. So caring for aging parents just takes a tremendous emotional toll on the adult children. And when your parents' health starts to decline, there's just this constant under the surface worry and anxiety that honestly makes it hard to focus on anything else. And we know that our jobs require focus. And then there are these complex feelings around the care and around their dignity. And this is especially true if you have to assist one of your parents with going to the bathroom or with bathing. And it also can cause you, this was true for me, caring for our parents in their, when they're elderly, when they're aging, it can cause us to focus on our own mortality. Because, when you see your parents declining health, for me, it's like my dad was Superman. He could do anything. He's my dad. My mom, she was this dynamo and she could do anything. But when you see them in a frail condition, it's really complex to process those emotions. And then we think about our own mortality. And emotional strain can cause mental fatigue, and it causes stress. And the end state of chronic stress is burnout. And not only is it distracting and it causes us to be distracted at school, but there's all kinds of things that go with this too. And then that's not even to mention that sometimes when our elderly parents, we're caring for them, we're doing the best that we can, sometimes they just show a profound lack of appreciation, or they're just downright mean because they're in pain, because of a lot of reasons, because they're afraid. And it's honestly, it's difficult to stay emotionally resilient at school when you're also managing feelings of fear and sadness, or even some guilt about not doing enough when it comes to aging parents. So the first big challenge is the emotional strain and the mental fatigue on you. And then challenge number 2 are the time management challenges. So, when you're caring for aging parents, it demands a tremendous amount of time and concentration, doctor's appointments, managing medication, providing for basic care, hygiene, clothing, food. What kind of food are they putting in their body? Are they safe at home with mobility? All of these things that we're thinking about. And you already have an overly full schedule as a school leader, and just trying to add caregiving tasks, it honestly feels impossible and exhausting. And we are already constantly battling the clock, and just trying to prioritize your professional responsibilities at school and your personal ones. Like I said, it feels impossible. So we've got challenge number 2, time management challenges. And then challenge number 3 is the feeling of guilt about not doing enough. And so I was talking about the emotional strain before. I want to talk about guilt specifically, because guilt, this is a quote from one of the blogs that I read. Quote, "Guilt is a constant companion for those caring for aging parents." Guilt is a constant companion. So whether it's guilt for not being able to do enough for the school, you have to miss an event, you have to miss a concert, or you have to miss a event at school because of taking a parent to a doctor's appointment, or whatever the case might be. It feels like we're in this push-pull between personal and professional responsibilities, and often it makes us feel like we're failing in both areas. And you've experienced that before with your family stuff. Well, now we're complicating the family stuff. And so when we think about this guilt, I want to give you a quick example. It's like, you may feel guilty about missing an event at school because you had to take a day off to care for one of your parents. And then you feel guilty that you can't spend enough time or more time with your parents because of events at school. And this push and pull, this conflict, it will lead to feeling drained physically and emotionally and frustrated and guilty. And so this is a heavy emotional price tag about this challenge number 3, the guilt of not doing enough. And then we go to challenge number 4, and that's the decline in focus and productivity at work. So there's a price tag to be paid with exhaustion. And we know that when we're exhausted, that our cognitive, there's a cognitive decline. There's our decision making, our problem solving suffers. And so all these emotional and physical demands of caregiving can make it really difficult to maintain any sense of any level of focus and getting things done, productivity at school. And, I don't know about you, but I found myself being distracted a lot during meetings when stuff was going on with my dad or when stuff was going on with my mom. And maybe harder to rise up in the occasion of a really important decision. Maybe we feel a little bit compromised, like in Alice in Wonderland when Hatter said to Alice, "You seem like you've lost your muchness. You used to be muchier when you were here before." I don't know about you, but I lose my muchness when I'm distracted by family issues. And this is a big one. You want to care for them, but your energy is just being drained by these caregiving duties. And before we go on to challenge number 5, I just want to remind you, in this podcast, if I'm giving you good news and bad news, I usually give the bad news first. And I do that because the good news is coming, the 7 strategies that we're going to use to make this better, but also because I want to identify these challenges because I want to make you feel like you're not a weirdo and that you're not a bad son or a bad daughter. These are normal. These are things that millions of people are experiencing as they care for aging parents. And so challenge number 5 is financial pressure. So this is expensive. Whether it's medical expenses or hiring a person that stops by the house for a couple hours a day, the caregiving services paying can be really, really financially draining. And let's face it, many private school leaders, there's a tight budget. Obviously they're not being paid what their counterparts in the public school system that are leaders are being paid. And so money might already be tight. Another thing that's happening is usually when you're in your 50s or early 60s, you may have kids in college, and that is another financial burden. And especially for families who their children went to the school that they lead, and it was either a big tuition discount or maybe even free tuition. There wasn't an expense there or as big of an expense, and now all of a sudden there are college expenses. And so there's a lot of school leaders that I coach who are dealing with aging parents and becoming empty nesters at the same time. Well, empty nester, that's a whole nother episode, but it's also the financial burden of why they're an empty nester, and that's because of college expenses. So lots of financial pressure. And then challenge number 6 is actually the physical toll of caregiving. So, caregiving for your aging parents isn't just emotionally exhausting. It can be physically demanding too. And so whether it's lifting your mom from the bed into a wheelchair, or providing daily care, or staying up late to try to make sense of Medicare, you're there on your laptop, or just this physical strain can cause exhaustion, physical soreness with your muscles. And let's face it, you're already running on fumes. It's really easy to neglect your own well-being. And we're going to talk about that in the strategies for success, is the double importance of self-care at this time. But there's a physical toll for caregiving. And then that leads us to challenge number 7, which is maintaining our relationships at home. So caregiving for our elderly parents, our aging parents, can just put a strain on all of our relationships. And so whether those are the relationships at school, but in particular, I'm thinking about your spouse or partner, if you still have kids at home, it's already hard to be present and be awake and be attentive and to give them the time that they deserve to pour ourselves into those relationships. And if that's already hard, and now we're adding this additional physical, emotional, and mental strain, it can become impossible. So those are the challenges. That's a lot. But we're now going to talk about the 7 strategies to help you navigate caring for aging parents while leading your school. Okay. So I gave you the bad news. Now I'm going to give you some strategies to help you do this. And I want to just lead by saying many of you that are listening are probably already doing some of these things. Maybe you're doing all of these things. That's awesome. But there's also other people listening who this is in your near future, or you're dealing with it and you're overwhelmed and don't know where to turn. And so wherever you are, I'm hopeful that at least a couple of these strategies are going to be super helpful to you. So strategy number 1 is to maximize your benefits at school. So we all know that time, I was talking about money before. I think time is probably one of our, if not the most precious resource that we have, because we know that once we spend time that we can't get it back. We can earn more money and then spend it. But time is such a valuable, precious resource. And we just have to understand that we have to understand what is available to you at your school. And so where I'm going with this is, this could include flexible schedule. And I know some of you are like, haha, flexible schedule. Okay. All right. Working remotely on certain days, or FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. And if your school has 50 or more employees and you work, I think it's 1,250 hours a year, which you work way more than that, then you are eligible for your school to provide 12 weeks of unpaid leave to care for a family member who is having health issues. And of course you have to qualify, and there's paperwork, and there has to be a qualifying event, and you have to jump through some hoops, but you could have 12 weeks of unpaid leave to, and there's also a thing called intermittent FMLA, where you get a certain amount of time, but it doesn't have to all be consecutive. And sometimes that is more what you need. And that also allows you to be at school some of the time and be caring for your one of your parents some of the time. And so this is just something that you need to look into more. I put a link in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 131. I think I put 2 links in there just to really give you some information about FMLA. And then that's something that you can ask your finance person or whoever is in charge of HR. FMLA is something that if you're not familiar with that it might be what you need, either like the full-time or the intermittent. Pay attention to what your school offers with regards to any kind of benefits, that could be possibly related to this. And so whether, again, that's PTO or remote work or using sick days as personal days or whatever level of flexibility the school would decide. And if you're head of school, these are probably conversations with your board chair, your board president. But strategy number 1 is to maximize your benefits at school and quite frankly, to become more informed about what's available. Okay. Strategy number 2 is to share responsibilities with your siblings. Now, around 85% of Americans have at least one sibling. And I want to acknowledge that just because there are many people listening to this that don't have a sibling, or there are leaders listening to this who had a sibling who has passed away. Okay. And I just want to mention that, I was the youngest of 8 children, and 5 of my siblings have passed away. 4 sisters and a brother have passed away. And there's 3 of us out of the 8 that are left. So I'm not just putting it out there that, an assumption that everyone has siblings, but many of you do have siblings. And this might lead to some uncomfortable conversations, because I want to talk about proximity expectations. And what I mean by proximity expectations is, let's say that you're leading your school and you're in Denver and your parents are in Denver, but you have a sibling in Cleveland and a sibling in Dallas. There are some unspoken expectations that you're going to take on more of the roles and responsibilities of caring for your aging parents because of the proximity that you live in Denver and they live in Denver, okay? And so you have to push. You have to have open and honest conversations. And again, if they're all in different cities, then you hop on Zoom. But it's like, we need to talk about mom, or we need to talk about dad. And everyone can do something. Maybe because you're local, that you're the one that is going to drive them to appointments. But it also could be that someone who doesn't live local can contribute financially, and then maybe you're paying for someone else to drive them to some of the appointments. Maybe you're in Denver, but the sibling that's in Cleveland is good with numbers, and they can try to navigate all the medical bills and the Medicare and Medicaid or the hospitalization. Maybe I've read some things when I was researching for this episode where, there was a terminal illness in one of the parents, and there were some siblings that took turns once a month flying in for a 4-day weekend. It's expensive, yes. And the ones who are farther away, it's more expensive. But everyone needs to participate. This can cause a lot of stress between siblings. I really believe that no is not an acceptable answer. when it comes to the participation. And there are ways for you to organize all of this, whether it's a Google Calendar where all the appointments for the parent or parents, a shared Google Doc, and so it has to be that all the siblings step up and that they share the responsibility regardless of where they live. There are ways to contribute even if they don't live close to the parents who need care. All right, strategy number 3 is to bring in the professionals. So there's an agency called Aging Life. There's a title of a professional. It's called Aging Life Care Professional. Okay, and in America, these used to be called geriatric care managers. And so in the show notes, I've linked to the website of the Aging Life Care Professionals Association. There's a lot of resources there. And you can actually go on that website and search by zip code to find aging life care professionals in your area. So bring in the professionals. I'm not saying you should use this agency. I'm saying there's a lot of resources on this website, and you can at least see if this is something that you want to do. You would be paying for this person. I'm not sure if it's covered by hospitalization or by Medicare, Medicaid. I'm not an expert, but at least it's a direction for you to go. And then this is a person who's kind of like a concierge, liaison, general contractor, whatever you want to call it, for kind of managing all the different aspects of the care. Okay. Now, you might not be able to afford that, and that might be you that plays that role. But at least you can check out some stuff on this website that's linked in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 131. The other professionals that are going to be brought in, obviously, the physician, the in-home care nurse, an elder care attorney. Again, expensive but necessary. Perhaps contractors. My mother-in-law, there was a contractor who came and built a ramp at the front of her home, and it wasn't cheap, but it's very necessary, and now she can get out and go to church and do some things. Professionals are expensive, but they can possibly save you time and money and shine a light on things that you never even knew about. And I'll give you an example. When my dad was not well. When we were meeting with my siblings and I were meeting with an attorney, there were some things. He worked in the post office for 35 years. He was a veteran. There were things that were available through the VA and some coverage, some things that were paid for, through the post office that, we didn't really know about. But meeting with the attorney, that we became aware of that. And then, of course, with those professionals, they might be able to help you maximize all the things that are available in Medicare or Medicaid or the health insurance that your parents have. So bring in the professionals. Some are going to be covered, some are not. And then, again, you have to balance that expense with the possible outcomes of relying on those professionals. Okay. Strategy number 4 is to increase self-care. Increase self-care. And I can hear what you're saying. You're like, yeah, right, Mark. I can't do self-care now. And then how am I supposed to do that when I add this whole other thing to my life? Okay. Hear me out. You are using sick days and personal days to care for your parents. What are you going to do when you get sick or when you need a day off? You're just going to suck it up. You're going to go to work sick, and you're not going to take those personal days. And I get that. We've all been there, whether our parents are ill or not. But I'm talking about being more proactive. So, for example, if your dad is going to be at the hospital or at an appointment, and it's going to be hours, tests and this and that and the other thing, and waiting on the doctors and waiting for this and that. You're going to go over to the hospital. You could bring water with you and some healthy snacks. That's being proactive. Or you can use the vending machines at the hospital and drink Mountain Dew and eat a couple candy bars. So self-care involves being proactive. That's one way. And then who's your sounding board outside the family? Caring for elderly parents has a high emotional toll. Who are you talking to? And maybe it's your spouse or partner, and that's wonderful. But you need to talk to somebody about this just to let off some steam and have a safe space where you can talk about how frustrating it is when you're doing all this stuff for your mom and then your mom's nasty about it. So who's the sounding board? And then one last thing that I'll mention on this strategy is I came across a website called workingdaughter.com, and I linked it in the show notes. And this is a woman who was in the corporate world. Both of her parents at separate doctor's appointments were diagnosed with terminal illnesses on the same day. And then the gist of the website, she wrote a book. There's a Facebook community. There are blogs. I'll read a couple titles in a second. But this workingdaughter.com, the gist of the whole website is, how do you navigate a busy career/job while caring for parents? I mentioned there's a Facebook community, okay? Others that are going through the same thing that you're going through. And then I want to list 2 blog post titles just to give you the vibe of this website. One is called When Your Elderly Parent Doesn't Appreciate You, and another blog post is called The Truth About Siblings and Caregiving. So workingdaughter.com, I think that it is a website that's accessible and useful for daughters and sons. And so it's a resource that's there for you in the show notes. And then just a couple more. Strategy number 5 is lean into technology. When we're trying to manage all these tasks and streamline it, it's easier to manage with technology. And let's face it, if we can imagine it, there's probably an app to help with it. And so whether this is reminders for the parent to take medication, or it's like a virtual support group on Zoom, the technology can bring more efficiency to the care that you're providing. And I'll just give you a quick example. So let's say that you go to ChatGPT and you type in, please create a packing list for a 3-day vacation. And then you describe the destination, you describe the hotel, you describe the activities that might be taking place during that time. And you say, please create a packing list for a 3-day vacation for an elderly person with mobility issues and type 2 diabetes. And then you describe the venue, the lodging, the whatever, okay? ChatGPT is going to spit out a packing list, and there are definitely going to be things on there that you didn't think of. And so these are just some ways to try to help you help yourself by using technology. And then strategy number 6 is explore resources in your community. Where you live, there are a lot of people that are going through the same thing with aging parents. And so you feel very isolated, but perhaps there are some things in the community where you live that are resources, services to support you as a caregiver, or services to support your parents. And it might be like an adult day program or a respite care service. These can provide some relief, some assistance, the senior care center, just some different things that might be in your community, and maybe you've never really explored that. And so how would you know? So it's just a suggestion to look at that. And then strategy number 7 is to ask for help. As private school leaders, I've said this before, we have a bias towards action and a bias towards problem solving and a bias towards do, and what's next. And we think we can outwork any problem. And some of us think we're invincible, and we just rarely ask for help. That is not going to work with this situation. We need to ask for help. We need to ask for favors. We need to ask for some breaks and for some grace, because we're going to need it. And so we need to ask for help. So if we're talking about the 7 challenges you will face trying to lead your school while caring for aging parents, number 1, emotional strain and mental fatigue. Number 2, time management challenges. 3, the guilt of not doing enough. 4, decline in focus and productivity at work. 5, financial pressure. 6, physical toll of caregiving. And 7, maintaining your relationships at home. And then the 7 strategies to help you navigate caring for aging parents while leading your school. Strategy number 1, maximize your benefits at school. 2, share responsibilities with your siblings. Number 3, bring in the professionals. 4, increase self-care. Number 5, lean into technology. 6, explore resources in your community. And number 7 is ask for help. And your call to action for this episode is that when you go through this, if you have got, when you're going to go through this, or if you're going through it right now, is to just be kinder to yourself. You aren't going to get everything right. This is highly emotional, highly stressful. You're trying to make good decisions. Just be kinder to yourself throughout this entire process is your call to action. And so I want to give you a free gift to encourage you. It's called the 6 things that every private school teacher wants from their leader. And this is a 6-page PDF that can be a real game changer for you. And I guarantee you that if you do these 6 things, that the teachers at your school will be happy to follow you. And you can grab this free guide at theprivateschoolleader.com/guide. And again, that's the 6 things that every private school teacher wants from their leader. And I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. And the show notes are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 131. And I would just really, really appreciate it if you would share the link to this episode or the link to the podcast with another leader in your life, another school leader, and with a rising leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I want to say how much I appreciate you and the hard, amazing work that you do for the lucky kids and teachers at your school. Thank you so much for taking time out of your week to join me here today, and I will see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.